Call this meeting to order. Welcome. The first order of business is discussion and possible consensus on the Operation Committee meeting minutes from December 11, 2017. So with regard to those, I would suggest that only the board members that were impaneled at that time vote on those particular minutes. So do we have any corrections or additions to those minutes? Seeing none, we'll start with Mrs. Castelli.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Reynolds? Mrs. Kay?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
And yes. Next is the Board of Education financial report for December 2017 and the financial forecast. Mr. Barone, wherever you are. Oh, there you are.
Is it on now? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go through the forecast and just really give you some highlights. Basically, we're projecting about a $47,000 surplus at the end of the year as of right now through the end of December, based on our numbers through the end of December. Some of the significant, some of the changes that we had from the last month, and I added a new column there to show you the change between the prior month and the current projection. I reduced the expected contingency because we're going to transfer some money to the food services to help them with some of their maintenance items. The benefits was an increase of about $40,000 based on people coming off the insurance or some folks who maybe we thought were going to have to pay a waiver to, but might have left the district. On the tuition, it's a modest decrease right now of about $8,600. The big, I guess, variance or potential variance is going to be the excess cost estimate. The state's going to give us a pretty good estimate by the end of the month, so we're going to see that number, the $1.6 million number, change. I believe it's going to go up on an amount, but waiting for the state to post some numbers up on the website. Okay. As far as transportation, no real change, but a whole lot of activity. If you look at the activity for the month, 10 or 12 different things happened, but the net effect was about $448. The salaries have increased about $73,000, and that's due to some projections based on some costs that we're not going to assume as soon as we thought we were going to. Unemployment is a modest decrease based on the last quarter. It looks like things have slowed down a little bit. We're still projecting a deficit of about 42,000, but it's gone down a bit, so that's good. You know, there was a concern as it kept going up the first few months, but it seems to have tapered off. Medicare, Social Security, we think there might be about 8,000 in savings there, or coming in under budget. And then the other accounts have not been projected yet. It's a little too early to look at those. We'll hope to have utility projections for the next meeting, provided the January bills are in and we're able to analyze those before that meeting. That's really the overview of what the forecast's looking like through December. Are there any questions?
Dr. Menzo.
I don't have a question, but I just want to remind new board members that might not have been following the process this fall that we did make a decision in the fall as a Board of Education to take the 1% that was put aside for other activities at the end of last year. We went to the town council and we asked that be put in an account for special education in the event that was running in the red. So we have approximately $700,000 that is in a reserve at the town. So again, I just want to be mindful of that is our money if we needed to apply it to this year's budget. that money was put there as a safeguard rather than spend it on what was initially intended, because we saw that the state was making some changes in terms of formulas, and we didn't want to be put in a position where we had to cut services to students during the school year. So that money, I just want to remind everyone, is there. The mayor was very supportive of that. The town council was extremely supportive of it because they saw us as being proactive rather than spending the money and then come to them and say, hey, we need $300,000 because we overspent. So we kind of put that in a fund. Right now, we have not touched a dime of that fund. But I just want to, because I know when you look at this, obviously you see that special education is continuing to be a volatile number. And as Dominic said, we don't have the percentage reimbursement from the state at this point. But I just, to lower anxiety, not necessarily totally do away with anxiety, but to lower it at this point, we do still have that reserve that's been untouched.
Mrs. McKay?
Yeah, so just, actually now I have two questions, because I just want to follow up, and that 700,000 though is, well, let me ask, are there any restrictions to that usage of that 700,000?
That was to cover any overage in special education. So right
So
now,
that was specifically earmarked for special ed?
So yes, so right now we're under budgeted $1 million in special ed.
Right.
So technically, we could apply that $700,000 to that $1 million, and we'd be only
perfect.
minus 300,000.
Okay. So, but my real question was going to go, hey, Dom.
Hey.
So you had talked about, just at the very beginning, a certain amount going to food service. Could you just give me those numbers? And that was from contingency?
Contingency.
Was it-
It was 17,000.
The 17,000 is going, okay, the 17,000.
To cover
is-
some maintenance costs.
Right,
that
so
they-
that'll keep food service just doing okay, right? Staying afloat?
It's going to help.
Right, okay.
Yes.
And we'll get that report, obviously, later on, but, all right, I just want to keep that in the back of my mind. Thanks.
And
So-
again, the rationale for that was that we felt it was important, and out of respect for the staff that's been working very, very hard in food services at all
Yep.
levels, we felt that those were expenditures that are outside their control in terms of sales and expense. Those are actually capital projects that we didn't
Okay.
feel appropriately represented, whether or not they made a loss or whether or not they made a profit. So we decided to move those out of their domain.
Okay,
because-
so that's not directed towards operating expenses. That's a really important, okay, that's where I was getting lost a little bit.
Yes.
So thank you for clarifying that. So that's not going to operating, just
Absolutely not.
everyday living expenses. That's going for, I really didn't know.
We had a
Thank you for
freezer that
vetting
had a
this out for
problem.
me.
There were a variety of different technical issues with equipment. So that is not like the last year in the fall of 2016, there was a subsidy of $32,000 or so made to the food services because of operating expense issues.
Correct. That's where I
This
was-
is totally different.
So this is a one-time usage for equipment, a capital expenditure, and thank you for clarifying. That's what I needed to hear.
All right. I just went, because I know they're working very, very hard. and
Well,
that was
see,
the
I
case.
thought that was going to operating, and I didn't make my question clear, Dom, to you, so shame on me, but we
Well,
figured it out.
I don't think we really determined how we were going to account for it.
Yeah.
And so, the one thing we don't want to do is just spend it out of contingency. I guess we have two options. We could just spend it out of the operating fund, and they've already spent the money, so we would reclass it. Or we could show the transfer in and show a capital or a maintenance account that's outside of operating to show that would give us a feel for what the cost of that program is.
Yeah,
But we'd
it
also
needs-
be able to say, hey, of that
Well,
17,000.
it's a clear delineation, I mean, is that
Yeah.
a good way to put it, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what
that
we
makes
would like,
sense.
what I think what we recommend and what we usually do, Dom, and I know this is your first time doing this, is that we would take it from contingency and identify it as a maintenance item so we could keep track of that. And then next year, when we're establishing the budget, as many board members brought to our attention and we knew you were going to ask, we've reclassified some funds or some accounts, especially in curriculum. So we would do the same thing next year when we get to our maintenance items. So you would see that change next year.
Mrs. Caselli?
So, Dr. Menzo, just to clarify, I'm sorry to keep
No, no
harboring
worries.
this, but
No.
it sounded like this is cafeteria equipment.
Correct.
And then I thought I heard you say that previously we had taken all of some clump of stuff off their plate and put it into regular maintenance. And what I'm
We
getting
do-
at, where I'm leading is with this. They have their unexpended funds that they have.
Correct.
That have to be used specifically, can't be used for anything except cafeteria expenses.
Correct.
So are we cutting off our nose by using contingency funds rather than money from there?
No, actually, in the past, the last 4 years, dating back to our previous, our two reserved directors of food services, the board made a decision that all capital expenditures were going to come from the Wallingford Board of Education school budget as part of a maintenance item.
Okay.
At the beginning of the year, this year, Dave was not aware of that, being new to the program. So he just assumed the responsibility of those equipment items in his budget. So we have not been taking equipment purchases from the food services account for the last 4 years.
Okay.
And that was when we started the strategic plan for food services, that was one of the key things. So the long time ago, prior to my arrival, when the surplus was much higher, yes, the director at that time would pay for some enhancements to the program, but not significant enhancements. What we believe now is that obviously we have to continue the path that we've been on for the last 4 years, that those come in the Board of Ed budget under the strategic plan. The mayor has actually paid for a lot of the enhancements through the CRA funds, the funds for the, I hate to, for lack of a better term, the trash money. So basically, those funds have paid for the combi ovens that we have at our elementary schools. They've paid for hand washing sinks. They've paid for a variety of different hood replacements at the schools. So that's where the mayor has offered those funds, and we haven't actually had to take those capital items from our budget.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Votto?
Just to be clear on, historically, whenever we take funds from one fund, from one line to another, we usually approve that as a board, correct?
Correct.
All right, so,
Correct.
all right, so normally we would have had this.
Well,
Or
you're
is this
not,
different in some
this
way?
is different. This is when, in contingency, remember, that's non-allocated funds.
I know, I always worry when you take money out of contingency, that's why I asked
Yeah,
the question.
so this is the one where we do every year, where we've been keeping track, and again, this goes back now even probably longer, probably about 6 years, where we started to show, in the past, we would run other accounts in the red, and at the end of the year, my point was that we didn't really know why we were in the red, because it wasn't a truing up of our accounts. So what we started to do when we had emergencies, because we had several emergencies through food services where we had to replace different things over the past few years, that we took those from contingency and then we made a note in contingency so that we knew how we used the funds. But we only took it from contingency. In the past, we would let Mark's budget run, my predecessors would let Mark's budget run in the red like $1 million or $500,000.
That budget was the one we usually had a.
Exactly, because we weren't making any adjustments, so it always looked like contingency never got touched.
That's true.
Right.
Which wasn't a good message, because the public thought, oh, well, that's their cushion. It really wasn't a cushion, so I had to true that up, and that's something that we've worked on. I think it's been at least, now that I'm here 9 years, it's been at least 6 years that we've trued that up
That's true.
over that period of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that first page? Now we're on B2. If there's any remarks you wanted to.
Okay, yeah, on B2, the Munis report.
Right.
Okay, yeah. And that's the system-generated financial statement.
So if anybody has any questions about that report? I know, it is.
Well, it looks a little bit skewed because in the Munis report, we haven't recognized any of the revenue for the excess cost. That's why there's a bigger deficit than we're projecting. Once the state tells us how much we're going to get, then, and wires the money, and we get the money wired typically at the end of February, and then at the end of May, we recognize the revenue, and it'll look better.
Any other questions on those two?
It's not a question, but just a comment, and I think it's important for the public, especially watching this at home, that we have been very fortunate as a Board of Education and a school district to maneuver through the very challenging fiscal times this fall without compromising any programming for any students in our district. And that's been in a collaboration with the town council, the mayor, being very, very thoughtful, being willing to meet at a moment's notice, because I do call him at a moment's notice and say, what's going on, Mayor? So I think it's important because a lot of other communities have gone to unions for furlough days, just recently in Hamden. They've gone to every single union asking for at least 3 furlough days. Other districts, we know surrounding towns have cut programming after school, during school, increased class sizes, all those things. We have not done any, and neither does our budget for next year increase class sizes. It maintains the threshold that you as a board has set for all of our schools. So I think I'm not looking for kudos, I'm not looking for anything else except for the fact that I think it's very important as we continue our journey this year that we take note of that. And we do take some pride as a community that we haven't had to compromise anything for our students or staff. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Mrs. McKay?
Yeah, and, to piggyback on that, because I travel sometimes at the state level, and people ask me about what our budget looks like, our current budget, not this budget that we're going to be talking about later, but so depending on your town structure too, there were towns that never adopted a budget. So they've been living now since July 1st, potentially without a current budget. And that's something that, I'll give kudos to the municipal side for that, in that, and whether it's town charter or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, we knew what our budget was come July 1st, and that's not the case for every community statewide. And to your point, Sal, that provides a lot of uncertainty. Like, how could you be entering into a whole new budget? And then some districts and communities have referendums that require them to vote and still can't get their budget passed. So again, for a variety of reasons, communities still don't have budgets that we took for granted. July 1st, we had a budget that was adopted and has been kept intact. And that's worth noting. Yeah, it's given us a peace of mind that other communities possibly don't have.
Any further remarks? Seeing none, we'll take consensus on the Board of Education financial report, starting with Mrs. Castelli.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Moving on to item C, the cafeteria financial report for December 2017. And we'll start with enclosure C1.
So on the, can you hear me? Oh, hello. We're going to start with December financials. How I like to do it to make it more user-friendly for you is we're going to go over the participation report first, and then into I know they're not in your order, it doesn't seem like it's in order for you, but the long spreadsheet on the participation that we've been doing this year, into the comparison, and then final with the summary. I think that's the best way to summarize it. So starting with the first participation log, we noticed that the free and reduced slightly increased from December to November by 11 meals, which was nice to see. And as you move over to the right part, the average meals per day was a slight increase too, of 18 meals district-wide. And the breakdown of those segments were the elementary, it was nice to see that we were up 27 meals.
Mr. Mentor, just for clarification, especially for, there seems some confusion on what exactly what
C1.
page we're on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the large
Oh,
participation
sorry.
sheet, we're gonna go over first.
Stand corrected, C2.
Yeah,
C2.
C2.
C2?
Comparison.
No, wait a second. C2 says comparison.
We don't have that. Should it be long like that?
Because we don't have that.
We don't have that. Okay,
No.
that's not good, so,
No, that makes it a bit confusing.
okay, so I will read slower then, so I'll go over that sheet first, and then we're gonna go over, you do have the comparison sheet, and then followed by the summary sheet, which says cafeteria operations on the top left-hand corner is the last sheet we'll go over. I'm sorry for that. All right, so to
Yeah, in December.
finish up on the participation, meal-wise, we talked about slight increases. We noticed that the elementary school, all the schools in the elementary sector went up 27 meals a day, which was nice to see, and the middle schools stayed the same. And we noticed that the high schools dropped 8 meals a day for the month of December versus November.
Excuse me, Dave. C2, they have it. It's just not legal. It's just on
It's
a.
just not, yes.
All right, so I just,
It's
That's the
in a
comparison sheet.
smaller
That's the next
form.
sheet we're gonna go over.
oh, I
next.
thought you were on C2. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, we don't
the
have
log,
the log.
the one that we looked at.
In future, do you think we could have that provided to the board? That might be easier for us to follow along on a report.
The log, the individual monthly log that we'll be giving you every month.
Right, because for some reason, we didn't.
Yeah, we apologize for that. I'm not sure how that happened, but we'll take care of it. Okay, so once again, finishing up on the first log that you don't have. So the percent of meals paid was slightly increased by a little less than half a percentage point, and we noticed that the free and reduced meals were down percentage-wise a little less than a percentage point. Our overall goal on this whole sheet is to get the whole district participation-wise on the far right-hand column to 40%, and we are at a little less than 36. So I feel if we could get to the 40% as a district, that will be an increase of several $1,000s and more meals. We look forward to hitting that number before the end of June. Now we could go over to the sheet you do have, which is the comparison sheet,
Okay, that would
not
be,
the summary sheet.
that would be C2.
Sorry, I got the numbers, yep. That's it right there, yep. C2, correct, I'm sorry. So, on the middle of the page, if you go onto that, you'll find December, where we currently closed last month. And something to keep in mind that I might have to say a couple times is we had one less serving day compared to last year, and this spreadsheet, as you know, compares everything to last year at the same month. So to continue on, our sales are down 12% versus last December, but once again, with one less serving day, and the meals were down 3,800 meals versus last December. But once again, the one serving day brings a lot to the table in this district where we're averaging about 1,955 meals a day. So if you include that with
Could you give that number
daily,
again, Dave? What was the number?
1955.
1955, thanks.
And the average daily income is about $8,200. So that's something to think about when we look at these numbers and do the variance. They're not apples for apples, and every month is different with serving days, especially with the snow days in effect. All in all, there was a 5.5 variance between the two years. And another thing to note that last year's program in December, under the reimbursement, the 67,000 number, they received a healthy food check, the first check of $13,000. And we have not received that yet. The state is obviously running late. We hope to see it come in this month and put into our financials for January. So once again, we got to look at the 67,000 number. They received 13, and we're going to get it next month, so there'll be a variance in there. Moving on, under other and catering on that revenue sheet, we had a good solid month of holiday catering. As mentioned before in the other meeting, we had 2 principals hire us for their catering staff party, and that increased our revenue, and we also received our first vending check, which was nice to see that we have in our 2 high schools. Total sales of 138 is down 26,000 versus last year, but once again, add in the average daily figure that I just mentioned to you guys about, and the 26K deficit actually becomes 18, give or take. And to include the healthy food check of 13,000 brings the difference back down to about 14K, not the 26K that it shows. So all in all, yes, we are still concerned with the sales being down, but we are progressing once again slowly, but at a pace that we are in the right direction.
Mrs. Raccio, you had a question?
Yes, so if I look at the comparison, the sheet that has prior year and current year for the 6 months, there aren't quarterly totals on it, but if I take the deficits and the profits for those 6 months, it comes out to, so far, and I know there's non-recurring expenses in here, because we have some of the, we already talked about capital expenditures that are in this, and we also have some unemployment costs that were unforeseen and obviously won't be there hopefully for next year. But we have a year-to-date loss of 85,000 if I add up those 6 months. And when we consider that that represents 77 days through December, serving days, then we have a daily loss of 1,112. If we look at our school year of 183 days roughly, and I don't know exactly how many are actual serving days, we could be somewhere about 106 days left. And looking at the daily loss, we could project another $117,000 loss. So we could end up, if we stay at the rate that we're at, somewhere around a $200,000 loss for the year. That obviously is the top line. Then you have to take off things that really aren't programmatic to cafeteria, like we talked about, the repairs, the maintenance, the capital items, the one-time things, even though it's over many months, the unemployment costs, things like that. But that is kind of, when I look at this, I go to the bottom line. Well, I make the bottom line because there wasn't really a bottom line here. But I kind of looked at the 3 months and the 3 months for the 2 quarters to see that we were at the $85,000 loss so far. So, and that'll probably tie into some of the budget questions when we get there. You've done fabulous things. And Mrs. McKay is on strategic planning with me with food service. You've done things in your short time here that I got emails going back years and years that I've asked for, and you've just come in and you've done them. So I think we're on a great track. Even one food service meeting ago, we talked about whole grain waiver, and the next food service meeting, it was filed, it was done, it was approved by the state. So I think we're on the right track. We've never had this amount of momentum. It's exciting because I think we're moving in the right direction, but it still is very concerning because the numbers just aren't there yet. So if we could just get totals on some of this,
No
like
problem.
the
I talked to
quarterly.
Don about it. We're going to eventually change the layout of this comparison sheet that we inherited from last year, and just give us a little more time to restructure that. But to clarify the loss, Tammy, what we need to think about or know is the beginning of school year in July and August, we accrued almost $74,000 in debt with no sales days, and that is a tough nut to fix. So we are, once again, we're climbing back from that deficit, and we're progressing in the right direction on meal revenue and variances. And so to get out of that hole, it's tough, but that's what started it. That's
Right.
what started your
Right.
numbers. And we are rebounding in the right direction, and we're going to cut that deficit.
And you don't have a good, and I've talked to Mr. Barone too, you don't have the ideal history in reporting that would give you the ability to say, first quarter, we expect this much of a deficit. Second quarter, we're on this much of a trend. Third and fourth quarter, here's where we end up. So I understand it's not easy to project, like, December is always about a 6% deficit, or January, February, March, those are better income months. So that history isn't there. The best thing that I could go on when I looked at all of this was daily average,
Yeah.
because that's all I had.
That makes sense. We're projecting kind of on the month, though. We're looking, because it is more cyclical than that, because like Dave said, we started $75,000 in 2 months with no revenue because the school's out. And we're also trying to, there's also some timing issues. One of them is that state check for, I think it was $12,000 that was recorded last year in December. And we're hoping it's gonna be recorded in January this year because we didn't get it yet. So we're trying to iron those out. And I think, but your point is well taken, that we need to have whether you want to call it a running total or quarterly totals, so that we could kind of see the whole year in an easy snapshot. And we're probably going to come up with another report, revise this one, to get a better feel for that, because this reporting is evolving every month at this point.
And one more thing. When I looked at the revenue, and I know from attending one of the board meetings back in the fall, the contribution from last year is in the October 2016-17, and it flows through, so it shows up as part of your sales for 16-17. So then when you compare 16-17 and 17-18, your variance is really, you're overstating your variance because you have a contribution that's really not revenue.
Correct.
So I like that it's identified and it's transparent, but maybe could we, if the board is in agreement, star it and say excluded is, so that your daily sales revenue is more comparative to what this year's actual is.
It should actually be spiked out maybe on its own line too, in this
However-
comparison sheet. so
however
that
you do it, but
you can
you're
see it,
not
but you're right.
apples and apples,
No,
and it's-
we're not
it's-
with that in there.
To your
Yeah.
disadvantage to leave it that way, I think.
Sure.
Any other remarks? Okay, moving on to marketing.
I'll finish up, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll finish up on this. So jumping to the expenses, finishing up on that statement, the comparison, my staff did an amazing job controlling food costs. We pulled a 29% food cost, which is pretty hard to do, where we average about 36% every month. They just tightened up the pencils, and like I said, I sent them emails, and they stepped up, and they saved us a lot of money. And it shows, even though sales were higher last month, they controlled food costs and did a great job. Our labor was up $5,000 due to unemployment costs that you know of, and we also placed 3 managers to their new job titles, which cost us a little more extra in labor expense. Total expenses are down versus last year due to less sales and a loss of $5,400 for the month. Overall, once again, I thought it was a good month controlling our costs in general compared to the sales days versus last year. Go over to the summary, the cafeteria operations sheet that you have, the summary. Once again, those totals that we just went over just fall over, and we pretty much critiqued all of that, where we went over the meals and we went over the variance for the month. But once again, remembering that we had the one less serving day, and that's why that 3,800 negative meal balance is showing 11%. But once again, is one less serving day. In our totals, I came up with a 5.5% variance because of the less serving day. Moving on to the marketing end, I'm not going to go over this.
If I could just interrupt, because I just want to clarify something. I think if you take the 2 C3s and put them together, they make the sheet that you were looking for. So just want to, I felt like I don't want to be the spoiled brat middle schooler in the room, but here you go.
Okay.
So, all right, so just, I didn't want anybody to think that it wasn't put in the packet. It was just those 2 different items. And I was embarrassed, I was nervous to even mention something, but Carrie insisted I say something.
It's all right. I thought it was C2, so.
So unfortunately, we are not going to go over that log again. Moving on, the marketing strategy, you have 2 pages, 2 for elementary and middle school.
That's C4. C4.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't have mine labeled, and that's pretty sad, but that won't happen again. So the marketing end of it, once again, pretty detailed sheet. I try to check off things as I move along month by month. I didn't get to several meetings, but I did join a few extra PTOs, which was nice to get out and network with parents and administrators. And I'm still getting together with principals for expectation meetings, which is important to them and us to see what is valued for them, what's important to them, and then I go over the results with my managers. Implementing a breakfast program, we move forward on that for next year. We're working with the State People from End Hunger, and we had a very successful elementary principal meeting last week. We went over expectations and logistics. Every principal is concerned, obviously, because every building's different, and we are gonna work with them individually to make sure their breakfast program works for them, the student, and my managers. So we're excited to do that, and we're gonna move on to the middle school principals next week with a meeting with the state. So that's all good stuff. We're able to actually meet with 2 principals and do an actual walkthrough when the student gets off the bus. We did that last week at Pond Hill and Stevens, and we were very successful. The principals are excited. And we are gonna implement a grab-and-go kiosk stand in the hallway as the students get off the bus. We feel that is a very simple approach to this new breakfast program, where it's quick, efficient, and the student will pick it up and get in the classroom within 5-6 minutes. Moving on, as Tammy mentioned, the state approved this last month for the whole grain waiver. We are currently implementing white enriched products back into our menu. One thing to note is we cannot make it 100% of the menu. We still have to have whole grains at 50% of our menu, which we have no problem to do, but we're gonna hit the bread line real hard in the secondary schools with what the students want, and that is a white enriched roll, and we're excited about that. We just started that. Surveys are out, as I mentioned to you guys the other day. The only one left is Lyman Hall students, and I'm working with Joe on that, and we're gonna have that rolled out next week. We did notice, as I used the school messenger approach with the elementaries for the first time, we received 500 hits within 2 days. So it's working. So we're gonna take those results and come up with some plans in action for my operators and go over in my meetings and really critique what the students are looking for. And what else? Customer service log, 2 consecutive months, no incidents, which was nice to see. And that's it on financials. And now we're gonna roll right into
Well, we're going to take consensus on that
Okay.
first, and, because are you looking to go to the presentation on the budget for the food services? We'll take consensus on the cafeteria financial report first.
Yes.
Unless there, okay.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, now we can go on to item D, the food services budget presentation.
All right. We have less documents for you on this one, so hopefully we won't get lost in the shuffle.
Dave, can you hold it up? What does it look like?
I'm sorry. So
If you go to your budget binder,
Oh, in the
section,
binder. Oh, budget
section
binder.
All the
7.
way towards the back.
Next question.
Thank you. I thought it was something he handed out.
No worries, section 7.
Got it.
There you go. All right. So on the revenues, the front page, in projecting our revenues for this school year for 17-18, we could see a loss up to approximately 4.25%, roughly $70,000. Based on the revenue number, I feel we could grow this program for next year about 2%. This would be approximately about a 5% turnaround for the good. We would do this by increasing additional programs. And some additional programs that we just talked about was implementing a district breakfast program in all the schools. And some other things that I have planned on increasing programs is to incorporate a Mexican line, which is very popular in secondary and high schools. I'm also have interest in implementing a salad bar in our high schools, and also improving the presentation of our foods by buying new cost-effective merchandising equipment. I think this is essential. I already been looking at the surveys on what students say, and one of the things they say is the appearance of the food. And I don't have to tell you, as students look with their eyes, even us adults, and the food has to be presented right, and it has to have the right equipment. And I think that's essential going forward on where we should be going. I also like to expand on our catering department, which we've rolled out, and we're getting more and more business every month. And some other things I have planned is to add a mobile breakfast cart in our high schools during study periods. We have several students in study periods that are hungry, and I have some thoughts about rolling out a breakfast cart during the middle of the morning. On the expenditure side, on the front page, as you could see, this is based on our increase in revenues of 2% that we just talked about, and we are proposing a 2% decrease in total expenditures. This would bring our program to a break-even point for next year. On page 2, we're not going to go over that, the second page of the budget, because all those numbers relate to page 1. So the last page, page 3 of the food service budget, is the operating expenses. And one to note is it shows a 47% decrease in the 7 categories under operating expenses, and that has brought a light to some of yours, and we had a question on the budget that I had to critique, and then we'll go over it now. With food services moving to central office this month, actually we did this last week, and we feel we can consolidate our overhead with our office expenses. We're consolidating things. We don't need the printers. We had 4 printers over there. It's just we're bringing it all together into the business office, and Dominic and his staff has been a great help to us within the week, and we're excited to be here. Purchasing less from direct manufacturers will lower our freight costs and increase our cash flow. I think this is important.
Could you say that again for me, Dave?
I'm sorry?
Could you say that again?
Yes. Purchasing less from direct manufacturers. And what that means is the district in the past, and I'm currently doing it, but not as much, is we receive direct tractor trailers of food to go in our warehouse from, like, say, a pizza company. Okay, we tie up whatever 3-4 pallets of food. You do get a slightly lower rate, but we're also tying up our cash. And our cash flow is moderate. We're getting by with our cash flow, but I feel that we could buy the same product from Thurston's in town here for just a slight more variance and have more cash flow in our pocket. It doesn't mean I'm going to get away from the direct ship, but we're eyeing that out. I'm analyzing that out with other districts and getting a comparison on that. Kitchen maintenance, we talked about it earlier. Expenses will be lower due to the continuity to the Board of Ed, and this will include less repairs, we hope, and I think going forward, since we're paying out quite a bit this year for next year. So we see a slight decrease in that. And an increase in our vehicle expenses for this year will bring us relief next year. So we had to take care of a couple of our vans this past month with tires and alignment, and we feel that will offset and give us some relief for next year. Does anyone have any questions?
I think
Yes.
Mr. Votto was first, followed by Mr. Ross.
I have a couple. Going back to your, we're talking about some incentives for next year, the breakfast Mexican line. I missed the one after Mexican line. Then you said cost effective.
Mexican salad bars.
Salad bar.
and,
Salad bar,
Yeah.
Okay, and now,
the appearance of
breakfast-
food, the equipment.
Yeah, I got that.
Catering,
Expanded catering.
mobile break. yeah,
this
cart.
breakfast program, what, is this just gonna be for free and reduced? Is it gonna be for the entire, every child in the classroom?
Right, it's a state breakfast program. Everyone is entitled to.
I know we might have talked about this.
That's okay. We apply as a program to the state lunch and breakfast people. It's a complete program for any student, and that's how the state wants it, whatever your status is, whether it's paying, free, reduced. It's a complete breakfast program, reimbursable breakfast program where we will receive reimbursements like we're currently doing now for lunch, and there's a good amount of reimbursements. Just to give you an example, a free breakfast reimbursable is $3.23 per transaction. So every time we hit that, which is phenomenal, where our breakfast is going to cost $1.50 for a paying student and 30 cents for a reduced student, we are going to receive $3.23 for a free status student that is applied. So
All right, so we're gonna get reimbursed $3.25 per.
for just a free meal. Reduced meal, I think, is $2.45, give or take, and then obviously a paying customer, there's no, actually, there is a reimbursement on a paying customer, I'm sorry, and that's about 85 to 90 cents. So there's a significant amount of money available for reimbursements, and Governor Malloy put that together several years ago to initiate districts to join their program, and we're excited that we're going to be able to do this. I have a lot of experience. I've opened 2 other districts with breakfast programs, so we really need this. And
Do
it
you
is,
think there's gonna be enough participation?
I think with the state behind us, the 2 people that are working with me from End Hunger who are meeting with the principals are phenomenal. The great thing, Mike, is the New England Dairy Council is going to be able to, I'll be able to fill out a grant and get over $20,000 worth of equipment at no cost due to a grant. These are the mobile carts that we're going to be applying for, whether we need pin pads and surfaces for transactions. They're phenomenal, and it's all good.
Is this like a cereal, milk kind of thing?
Yeah, so the menu is going to consist of I have to be right up front with you, we call it a breakfast snack. It's not a breakfast like a full meal like we would get at home. So it is a state reimbursable approved breakfast, and we will have a different menu every day, and it's going to be user-friendly. They're going to be able, the students be able to take a clear bag with a handle and put whether it's a low-fat muffin or a frugal pastry, and then all they have to do is take a fruit, and so they only need 2 components for, or they could take up to 4. So it's going to be the offer versus serve program that we currently have for lunch, and we'll present all those items on the cart, and they'll be able to take that and put it in their bag, and we'll record the transactions.
Just one more question. We had that meeting a few months ago with the food providers, Thurston and the others. We had talked to them about probably trying to help us with promoting and all that kind. Did that ever happen? They were going to try to help us promoting some of the food and advertisements.
Which organization was that, Mike?
Thurston and.
Thurston and,
When we met with Rosner's, Thurston.
Oh, in the beginning of the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very helpful, especially Thurston being in town here. I have a good rapport with Tim, and he's constantly sending brokers to me with samples, and that's important that we're not complacent, and we're changing our menu, and we're having I still
Always
want
working with
to
you.
do some taste testing with students and get them
Good.
involved.
Sounds good.
Mr. Ross?
I just have a couple of questions, and I'm a little confused on this breakfast. They're going to grab it and run, and when they get to class, eat the breakfast?
Right, so they'll come off the bus, Ray. They'll go right to the line of the kiosk stand that's
Yeah.
mobile, and their prepackaged bag is going to be already started, and then they'll put the few items in that they want, and then we'll record the transaction. They'll turn around and they'll go right to the homeroom.
And they'll eat it
And
in the
they'll eat it
homeroom?
in the homeroom while the teacher's getting them together for the first part of their day.
Okay. And the other on catering. Are we attempting, I know there's a lot of special events after sporting events, and they go outside. Are we going to make an attempt to get this business?
Yes, that's a good question, because that's something that Tammy and I talked about in our strategic meeting. And we're going to work on, we have a field trip document that we give to all the administrators and clerks. So we're going to expand off of that and make a sports flyer and actually sell them an a la carte grinder where they're looking for quantity of food, the athletes. So we are going to incorporate that. There's a few districts that are currently doing that. We're going to look at their ideas, talk to them, and then definitely incorporate that where before they get on the bus, it's pre-ordered. They're going to buy our grinder, be ready, and they don't have to worry about bus stopping and parents, last minute shuffling or the kids running outside to the store and then jumping on the bus. And we're all over that. We're going to look
Right,
into that.
and actually what I meant by sports things, after like a senior night and these events, there's always back to the cafeteria and they have a meal, which is catered outside.
Right, so
Are
that's a good point, is I'm slowly working with the athletic directors to take some of that business, and they've been great, the two athletic directors at the high schools, and I've currently send them promotional flyers, and we give them menus, and we say, support food service, keep it in-house, and we picked up some business from, I know you're new to the board, we picked up 2 banquets from girls hockey, soccer, for Christmas outings we picked up, instead of them going to a restaurant. We're excited to see that, so.
Okay.
Mrs. McKay?
Okay, so, I'm going to go with, I have a positive that I want to, and a kind of a concern. I have 2 concerns, but one's a positive concern versus a negative concern. So I'll start with the positive concern in terms of, based on all the things, and I do sit on your strategic, committee, that I think you have so many great ideas, and you are so open to hearing about what's important to families and students and looking for new opportunities. I wonder if you show just a modest increase on the revenue side for 2018-19, and I just wonder if that, and I'm not sure what the right number would be, and I just wonder, I guess I want to talk about how you've projected for overall revenues and operating expenses.
Sure.
And so I think on one side, it's very hard because you don't have historic evidence to suggest that, you could go higher in terms of what your revenues could look like. But I think you've underestimated your potential on revenues, because I think, you do have so many great ideas and you are so willing to pivot if one doesn't work to move on. I am concerned on the other side, on your operating expenses. You've reduced your potential operating expenses almost by 50%. And I worry, and you explained, I got that moving to central offices of savings, reducing the amount of purchasing direct, the quantity for direct manufacturing, that manufacturers, I get those are things that could help reduce. I'm not convinced, though, that I'm worried that your operating expenses are too low, and I'm thinking your revenues are too low. So I'm just concerned about your numbers, I'll be honest. And I know I articulated that in a question to Sal. So I appreciate some of the conversation, but I am concerned really about the expense side more than the revenue, I guess. That's just my opinion.
Right, and what we could do, Roxanne, is, I talked to Dominic about this, is we're gonna analyze this every month, and if we have to make adjustments, next month, the month after reporting the financials this year, we're gonna get a better eye, but seeing where the program's going this year financially,
Right.
I can't say I'm gonna increase revenue next year by 10%.
I get that side.
Or I'm down 4%.
Yeah, I understand why you're conservative there. I totally respect that, and I would probably be equally conservative. So I guess that's just a shout out more that I have confidence that I think you're going to do better there. And I do agree, I wouldn't necessarily increase that. But that is a vote of confidence I have in you, that I think that's I think that number's, and I do understand it takes time, and you have a lot of things working against you that you walked into the program. I get that. But focusing on the operating, because you're projecting to break even, basically. And I hope you do. I really do. I support that 100%. I'm just not convinced you're going to be able to reduce your operating expenses by almost 50%. That's my concern, I guess. And I'm putting it out there, and I just want to make that
Just for
point.
clarification, because some people might not have this at home, the operating expenses, I want to make sure that we're referring to are not salaries and benefits.
Correct.
And staffing.
No,
They're
it is not.
actual, we're dealing with office supplies, which
Exactly.
personally, I believe is bloated at at $11,000. My office doesn't even use $5,000 for, all the
Oh, for office
awards that we
supplies,
give.
right.
That's highly bloated.
Okay, and that could be,
So
and maybe
I
that's a
do-
good point, but.
And I look at our schools and what we have for our teachers per allocation, so I think that's a high, the freight I don't know enough about, so I question it negatively, but just
Right.
don't know enough about that. We talked about the electric.
I mean, nothing's in line. I mean, if I
Yeah.
look at actual for 16, 17, I mean, the trends are, like, that's crazy. Office supplies in 16, 17 was 29,000.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was versus the year before 7,000.
Which is-
I mean, we're
yeah.
all over the place with these numbers.
Right.
And again, poor Dave, I get it. You're walking into something. I mean, when I look at actual 2016, 17 versus your projected, they're all over. It's difficult. I just.
Well, you go back to 15, 16, it was
Right.
50,000, so.
Right, which actually aligns better to your
With the
projected
projection,
17, 18,
exactly.
frankly.
Exactly.
So, in some areas, not all. So I don't know. Shame on me if I don't raise it. I get there's a lack of history here. And thank you for clarifying that I'm not
It's-
talking about personnel and
Yeah, I just wanted to
benefits.
clarify
And
that.
thank you for saying that. You're right. It is not, that's not what I'm talking about, but.
Roxanne, your point's well taken, and just to clarify, and what we analyzed was, like, you just mentioned actual 16, 17 office supplies, and I did research that, and last year, the program had an administrative state review, and they spent 5 months and
Okay.
hired a registered dietitian and spent $24,000 to pay her.
So it was an
that was
anomaly.
unfortunately
Yeah.
it was allocated to the wrong expense.
Expense,
And
yeah,
I-
that
and I
should not have
found
gone
that-
there,
So that's why
right.
that number was so high.
Right.
Where, once again, it is a little over the
And,
board.
and to Sal's point, I mean, we're talking about, well, depending on what year you're looking at, somewhere between between $50,000 to $100,000 of a $1.6 million budget. So, I mean, let's keep it in perspective in terms of that. And, I don't know. I made my point.
Mrs. Purcell?
Hi. I just had a quick question about the breakfast program. You were saying that the governor gave the reimbursements to incentivize school districts to start it. My question is, if we start it and we develop and get it going, will those incentives continue as far as you know?
I'm sorry, if it doesn't continue.
Would we continue, right, because I didn't know if it was like a cable company where they say, we're going to give you this much, you get started, you get hooked, and then all of a sudden it's gone.
Right, so to answer your question, so to start out is, once you apply and register your schools, we receive $2,500 per school as a grant, and that's a lot of money. It's almost $20,000. You have to stay on the program, so we're gonna have to work at it. We're gonna have to market it. I have to talk to parents. We feel, and already just meeting with 2 principals, elementary, they're excited about it. They're saying that there's kids coming into their school every morning that they haven't eaten. And that's a concern, and that's why the governor 7 years ago put money aside in the state for this program. And
Going on that long.
yeah, it's
The difference, though, that those incentives are the $2,500 per school. If those go away, you still get the $3.23 a meal.
That
You
was
still
my
get
question.
the 90 cents. That's federal.
Got
So
it.
those don't, right now, according to where we are, those aren't going away. So that's the real moneymaker. If it ends up making money, that's where you're gonna get your largest revenue from. The $2,500 per school
yeah, it's-
is not really, it's money. Don't get me wrong, it's money. But that's not the big big chunk of money. So I just want to make sure that that's understood, because the reimbursements are federal. Those are not Governor Malloy. Those are not state mandated. That's federal. That could change. I can't say it can't, but that's federal. The $2,500, that's, was based on the administration presently in office at the state.
And the startup costs, that, we've got some help there, but those startup costs go away too, so we don't need to be buying new equipment every year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Raccio?
Do we get an extra 10 cents like the healthy food certification on this too?
No. We get the
Had-
6
well,
cents.
Nice
we're
try.
coming up for that renewal, February or March, so if we were, we'd check that
Right,
box.
it's just lunch base, and then, 10 cents for healthy food, and we get 6 cents a meal for lunch, too, from the state.
Other questions?
Yep.
Mr. Reynolds?
So the reimbursement is $323, and what was our cost?
The cost, well, that's a free reimbursement
Yeah.
back from the feds. Our cost, I'm putting that together for the district with a timetable for, so we know where we stand, to bring in what it's going to cost us for our manager to come in earlier. That should be ready within the month, or on how we do find. And we're going to have a break-even point too, Patrick, on how many students we need to break even per school, which is going to be important to see. It could be 15, it could be 20. But I'm talking to schools now, they're doing 60 to 100 lunches per school. I mean breakfasts per school in our same size district.
Thanks.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much for that very informative presentation on the
Yeah.
budget.
Just a point of reference, because the cafeteria account is an enterprise account, we present together when we go in front of the town council. The board can approve if you'd like, you could take consensus on this budget tonight, or you could wait. But again, the fact is that this is a separate account, so you don't do the two together. So our budget, the 1.99 sustained, 48 strategic, that's a separate one, so you would take two from both, but again, for the purpose of the new board members. But again, you as the chair of the committee could do what you
Well,
choose.
technically, it just says presentation, it doesn't say.
But we
any
always,
action.
yeah, we always put the presentation, even as we move forward. We won't start putting consensus on these agendas. We haven't in the past.
That's
So-
fine, that's fine. What's the board's pleasure? Did you want to take consensus this evening?
Sure. And it does say consensus under
Well,
item number 2 on the agenda.
That's fine.
For all the items below. we can
Oh,
make
yeah, it does,
consensus.
it does. The Roman numeral.
Yes.
The Roman numeral.
Well, typically on presentations, we don't, but, so
No,
if
but
it's the
that's
board's
why we
pleasure.
added, that's actually why we added agenda item number 2 to be there all the time, so that in the instance where we are having a.
Possible consensus,
Right.
it covers
Right,
it all.
It just covers this. So we
Okay.
can do it.
Yeah, because you've
So
got
if that's the
the,
board's pleasure, we'll take consensus on this.
I'm good.
Starting with
I'm
Mrs.
prepared.
Caselli.
Yes.
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 Yes, with the allowance for the revisions that you talked about that you're going to be working on for the next 2 months. So we're not going to be locked into this if there's future revisions.
Yeah, correct.
Correct, okay. Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
And yes. All right, moving on, the budget discussion, just a few items that I wanted to go over. The questions that were posed by board members, the answers are at your seats in this document, and then there were.
We have a revised document coming around.
Oh, geez.
So,
All
sorry.
right, the revised document is coming around.
Goes the
I mean-
office supply budget.
Clearly, we're not going to
Exactly.
be reading these at our seats, so if you have additional, after reading the answers to the questions, additional follow-up.
There was, the questions were, I believe we broke 100 questions from all of you, so I think you broke a record. So congratulations. We've tried to answer questions even that came in as, this afternoon. As I said, there's one that I think we didn't get to, but we will get to. It was a maintenance budget question. It was a small one, don't worry. It was only Parker Farms. Christina. Oh, you did get to it. Oh, no, Mark actually got it. So all the questions, all 105 questions.
No, 107.
107 questions by the board members were answered. So, I'm proud of my team, so thank you, good job.
So, we can review those, and if you have, not now, we can review them at our leisure, and if there are other follow-up questions to those, they can be asked or addressed at our next meeting on next Monday, the 29th. So there's so much material to review. So in an effort to make sure that we clearly understand each portion of the budget this evening, we're going to begin with Section 4, Comparison by Object, the Sustained Services Budget, and we'll review object codes 100 through 800 with an anticipated finishing time of about 8:30.
What section?
Section 4.
Because as the evening wears on, we get fatigued, you're looking at lines and lines of numbers, and we want to make sure that we're all fresh and looking at these numbers as we should. So usually, in the past, usually 8:30 is a good time to stop as we go through. So we're going to turn to Section 4.
And just as a reference, and I know the board members have seen this, and we received some very nice compliments about sections 1 and 2, not to go through them right now, but those are the data backup. Those are new sections to the budget book. The first one, section 1, is all the district high-level data, looking at enrollment, looking at staffing, looking at our different populations based on different areas of the district. And then section 2 is a school-by-school analysis, present year, and projected a year in terms of enrollment and resources. So I just wanted to call, if people are watching this on TV or in the audience, those are 2 new sections to the budget. They are online, so you can go to the online document, and those are also in there, but we use that as backup. And those really drive the development of the sustained services budget. So.
Okay, we're starting with Section 4. This page, the first page, 4A, kind of gives you an overview of what's in this portion, and then we can go to each page, and if there are specific questions, we'll go through them. So we'll start on page 1, and if there are any questions or people want to comment from administration.
Just
or the
again,
board.
to help people understand, section 1, or page 1 of this section is the 100. This is the salary account. We start with 111 account, which is our certified salaries. You'll note the general wage increases for teachers. It does show that we are anticipating 11.5 teacher reduction due to enrollment decreases. And the schools, that's why I was referring to that data, because you could go and look at the school profiles to see which schools are going to be reduced in terms of classroom sections. We started the year out, actually, to be honest, we were kind of caught because we anticipated a higher enrollment, especially at a couple of our elementary schools, that didn't present itself to us, but sections had already been established, teachers had already been hired. If that had happened, probably if we had been notified of that probably in July, or excuse me, even June, we probably wouldn't have opened those sections this year because class sizes in a few of our schools were well below the representation that is in other schools. So we really tried to be consistent in those areas. So that's where you can look for that information. The preponderance of those reductions are at the elementary school due to the decrease in enrollment at the elementary level. We do anticipate a reduction of at least 1 staff member at the high school level. Subject area to be determined. As was presented on Monday night in my budget presentation, we are having our department heads teach 1 additional class, so that will potentially relieve some staff members of responsibilities. So it might not be a clean 1.0 in English. It might be a 0.5, a 0.5 in something else. So I just wanted to share that when you look at Lyman Hall and Sheehan, you don't see the -1 staff member because it isn't determined as to where that staff member will be coming because courses haven't been assigned yet. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Sal, when you're saying you're reducing staff, is that by attrition or is that by layoff?
That's by layoff, as I said,
Okay,
because
all right, just wanted to
enrollment. The
clarify.
enrollment is down, so we would have classes of 15 and 16, and I think the board going back, throughout my tenure here, that's not something that we could sustain in the district. We do anticipate that 4 members of the group, there are other positions through retirement that would potentially be open for staff members. One of the positions that is being reduced is not being filled. It's an IT teaching position. It's somebody who they really were in the teachers union. They worked on a data level at the district, working with the high schools. So we're going to contract those services out and save significantly on that and not replace the full-time position. So we believe that 7 of the staff, there will be 7 true layoffs at this time. But again, retirements can, creep up upon us throughout the school year.
Another question.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's okay.
You had brought up the department chairs, increase their teaching workload.
Correct.
Now, how does that fit in with their current responsibilities?
Um,
I mean, I would assume that they had a reduced teaching load because they had additional duties to do?
They did, and we've been having this conversation. You've been on the board for several terms in a row, and we've had the same conversation each year. We were about to do this last year, actually the last 2 years, and we didn't have to at that point. This year, we believe that we're at the point where we do. We have, through the union, reached out to those department chairs. They have understood the request. So again, I don't believe there's going to be a reduction in service. Our principals are on board with this as well. We don't make these decisions just as a central office team. We met with both Lyman Hall and Sheehan High School's administrative team to review this prior to even presenting this. So we do not believe there's going to be a reduction in service to fellow teachers as well as students.
Mr. Votto?
That was part of my question, but first of all, I'm happy to hear this is happening. Now, you did say you weren't sure yet where those department chairs, say in language and in ELA, is going to, what job that person will have, what extra.
No, I'm sorry. I wanted to clarify that because I think it wasn't as clear as it could be. We all know they're going to be teaching the 4th class in their content area.
In their content area.
Based on student requests for courses,
Right.
we have to see in a department of, say, 8 people, are there requests to have 8 full-time staff members? So that's something that we do not get until course selection is done. So what might happen is that department chair will still teach 0.8 and be a department head 0.2, but naturally they're picking up one section of a class. So at the very least, we have at least a 0.2 out of each department that most likely will be reduced on the part of the present teaching staff.
Okay, but what if there's not enough children didn't sign up for a world language? So now you really don't have a spot. That world language department chair doesn't have an extra class to teach.
Well, our department chairs have seniority. So most likely we would have to look at the least senior person that is certified to teach in that area at the high school, and that person would be reduced from his or her in their responsibilities.
My follow-up question to that was going to be, is it still, can teachers still teach one area out of their subject?
Correct.
So in the event, that could happen.
It could happen if we have somebody who's dual certified in 2 different areas at the high school level.
You don't have to be dual certified though, do you?
You do. You do now. They've shifted. The state has become more strict and stringent with their certification requirements. We get exception reports every fall from the state, so I know if Cindy were here tonight, she would say that we're trying to toe the line there, and especially at the high school level. Middle school, there used to be more flexibility, and that's why we shifted away from having teachers teach both English and social studies or math and science, because the state was moving away from allowing that out of the area extra course to be taught, or
No, don't
course.
middle school, don't they have K-8 certification or 1-8 or?
No, not all middle school teachers. Some
Not
are
all,
712. Some have 4-8
Right.
certification. Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Castelli?
Yes, Dr. Menzo, the tutors, homebound and in-house, based on what I read in the paper a few weeks ago with the state now requiring more hour, in other words, that the students that we expel will have to have a full day as opposed to the 2 hours that we now pay for. So I'm concerned that we didn't increase this figure, or I know that's not, I don't think that's been finalized, but.
It has been finalized on some levels. There is definitely going to be some pushback at this general session. When I met with the state representatives and State Senator Fasano a couple of weeks ago, that was my number one item, because I believe the state has punished all school districts for the mishaps maybe of a few districts. So therefore, we do a very thorough job with our few students that are expelled each year. We provide them the appropriate resources. We have high-quality tutors that are working with our students. I meet voluntarily with the students 4 times during their expulsion to go over their college and career plans with their parents. Those are actually now all part of the new statute that all superintendents in all districts should be doing. I didn't mean to do that. I don't think we did it to cause that. But the challenge that you bring forward is they're saying that 10 hours a week is not going to be acceptable. It has to be a full-time educational program. If the student is not special education, we could potentially look at our adult education program. So that's why we did not increase this. If the student is special education, then we potentially, that would not be an option. So we would have to look elsewhere.
But putting them in the adult education program, I thought they're not allowed on, for our expulsions, they're not allowed on any.
There's some caveats that are being, or I shouldn't say caveats, there are some adjustments that are being made through the legal process. So some districts are investigating that because they could be going to a night course, which is beyond school hours. There's exceptions. Unfortunately, that's the way sometimes
We're going
these
to try
things
to find that
go up.
loophole, is basically.
Yeah, I think what's happening right now, to be, again, you know me, to be very candid, I think the RESCs are looking at this as an opportunity to potentially increase their revenue. So they're all looking to establish expulsion centers and then charge us probably $12,000 a year plus transportation. And then there's and again, I won't be popular if somebody at the state is watching this, but then it's an easy way for the governor or the state to not have to fund the RESCs at the same level that they did this year. So again, putting another burden on the back of this local schools district and the local taxpayers. So we're going to work very hard, first of all, to make sure our students are doing what they need, so that we don't have to come to an expulsion hearing, number one. But number two, we're going to make sure that we work creatively and collaboratively with the families in the event that we have to. I do want to make it very clear, though, because I was approached by a person, and I won't say their affiliation, but it was not local, who said, well, you just should not expel students. And that's not going to happen in Wallingford, nor should that happen in any district. We should uphold the guidelines of state statute and uphold the guidelines and policies of the Board of Education. So I'll make it very clear that we are not going to shortchange any processes or any guidelines or statutes. We will uphold them like we did yesterday. We will uphold them the same way we're going to do that tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. That was a little appalling to hear that. And I know there's challenges in a lot of districts, but it doesn't mean we lower the standards. And that's where I think we could really, a slippery slope that we don't want to travel on. So just want to share that. You could tell I'm a little bit revved up about that. I'm calm today. I'm very calm today because last week in the mayor's office.
I'm glad I gave you a chance to vent.
Yeah.
Mrs. Raccio?
The mayor pushed my button on it today too, purposely, just to have fun with me.
In addition to changing the status from a .6 to a .8 on the department heads, do we know what the stipend is for the department heads or for the district, what the financial impact is and how many department heads we have?
Yes, we can get you the detailed information on that. The stipend is still staying,
Okay.
so I can get you that number.
Further questions on page 1?
Just if I could, I'm sorry.
No. You could.
Well, I was just going to follow up to actually a question that Tammy, ping pong here. I just want to be clear that requiring the chairs to teach that one additional class, you're not incorporating that anywhere as a financial implication.
We are incorporating it as a
It-
savings.
So is that savings, so that goes back to that 11.5, but not necessarily, I mean, I guess, where does that?
No, that doesn't
where
go
would
into
that be?
11.5.
Where
That's
would that
just
be?
it's a salary savings. It's just in
Okay.
the general salary
Just
account.
in a general?
General salary account.
Thank you.
Mr. Reynolds?
Substitutes, how do we compare to other schools? Because I'm looking at what, short-term is $80 a day.
Which schools would you like to have us get you
Well, no,
comparisons
no,
for?
just- No, I mean, these,
I don't know. I mean,
You wanna know?
the state doesn't offer the data on
okay.
substitutes.
And when was the last time, would you know when was the last time we raised that?
The sub pay, I want to say it was not this past contract with the teachers, the last contract, the
Okay.
contract
All right.
prior to the one that we just entered, starting not this July, but July 1st, 2016.
Mrs. McKay?
So with substitutes, what's our requirement? What is the requirement to be a substitute in Wallingford?
Right now, well, it's a state requirement. So you have to have, I believe it's 2 years of college.
Is that pretty consistent across all?
That's what all districts utilize.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and pretty much anywhere you go, that's the requirement is
Correct.
2 years of college?
Correct.
Gotcha, thanks.
Further questions on page 1?
I just have a procedure question. If there's something here, can we always go back to it at a later time?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to page 2. That took a long time, sorry.
So
Still in
page
personnel
2 is the
services.
non-certified salaries. You'll notice a lot of asterisks. It's because we have a lot of negotiations this spring. So you know that we're in full swing with at least 4 different unions, non-certified unions this spring. Actually 5 because we have a mediation with one tomorrow evening. So that's why you see a lot of asterisks, because those salaries are in flux. We have incorporated, as we always do in contingency, but we're looking to hopefully settle all of these agreements by the end of the school year and not have any retro that would have to go into the following school year.
Any questions on this page?
Yeah, on security guards, how many security guards do we have?
There's 2 at each high school,
Two?
one during the day, one in the evening or in the afternoon.
So we have a total of 4.
Yeah, and that's all detailed on the school pages. So if you want to look more clearly at what each school has for staff, we painstakingly listed every single staff, not by name, but by position,
Right.
every single staff member.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Mrs. Corso?
The Career Center coordinators,
Yes,
is that the college and career specialists?
correct,
One for each high school?
correct. And that was a question that I think you brought forward with a list of the responsibilities. I know oftentimes, and we could discuss this further, there's been, and we could, probably it's a longer conversation, but it's been suggested that those could be duties that are released back to counselors. Again, if that's a discussion we'd like to have, I would make certain that we'd want to have our administrators from our high schools here, as well as our counselor department heads, give them the benefit of being here. But there are a tremendous amount of responsibilities that have been added. It's unfortunate, but again, it's difficult. I know my number one probably criticism that I would have of myself is that sometimes I assume that it's easy to take away a position and that there's going to be somebody to pick it up, or that you assume people have more time in their lives than they do. We've done that, and the unintended consequences can be really dramatic. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at this, but these are just, it's one area that I know comes up annually, that we do have, there are responsibilities that I'm not certain could be assumed totally by just counseling staff.
Mrs. McKay?
I just want to make an observation. I just want to give a shout out and for waivers and medical insurance. That's a great. That's nice to see that reduction, and that's the hard work of a lot of people to get there.
It's a collaborative effort on the part
Yeah.
of the union staff as well as
Exactly, that's what I'm
administration.
saying.
Absolutely.
That's a reflection of a lot of people on all sides of the aisle, so.
Absolutely.
And
Um,
that's appreciated.
Just in terms of also the career centers, I don't know if people looked in the resource section, section 8. There is a sheet that just shares a little bit of their statistics from the past year as to the activities that they participated in with our students.
Other questions on page 2?
Oh, just for clarification, we are reducing one clerical staff member, and that is through attrition. I just want to make that statement again. I did make it the other night. It's not where we're laying someone off, we're just not filling a position that is, someone is retiring from.
Moving on to page 3, we're now in Object Code 200, Employee Benefits.
As you know, we get multiple updates from the mayor. Dominic will be attending a meeting next week, I believe on Tuesday, correct? If I'm not mistaken. And he'll be representing central office with our insurance consultant to see if these numbers have changed. Right now, our experience looks like 5%, so that's what we've maintained in this budget. But we asked for at least 2 more updates before you finally seal the deal on February 26th.
Why do we expect such a big jump in unemployment?
Because of the teachers that we will be laying off, we have to pay their unemployment. And also the para-educators that we anticipate to be reduced, and also the recess aides. Those, we're responsible for unemployment on all those employees.
The way we pay unemployment is we actually pay the costs, unlike a for-profit company that just, it's like essentially a tax for a for-profit company. But for us, when somebody goes on unemployment and we're deemed liable, we actually pay that
So
money.
we're self-insured, basically.
Essentially, it's a way of looking at
Correct.
it, yes.
Thank you.
Further questions on this page? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next page, page 4. Object codes in the 300s, purchase professional and technical services. Mrs. Purcell?
I just wondered why the elementary school PD went way down.
That isn't the conferences and workshop line, it's having a presenter come in. So based on how the buildings are allocating their funding, they might have just put it in the 580 line, not in the 320.
There was no reduction to the total PD for any school levels. It's just, again, as Carrie said, that it could go in many different lines.
Okay.
Other questions on this page? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 5. Continuation of the 300s. Nope. Okay. On to page 6. Object code 400s, purchase property services. No questions? Go on to page 7.
Again, our night custodial is all contracted, correct?
Except at the middle school?
Except at the middle schools. And during the day, there are.
Correct.
Mrs. Corso?
Why are the middle schools the only ones that aren't outsourced?
Mr. Deptula, would you like to share the history? I think you're the historian.
That was something that took place years and years ago, and I don't really know the background. I'd have to get back to you on that. There was some kind of agreement that goes back to the 1970 opening of Sheehan High School. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, and I've never personally seen that agreement. But I'll look at that. I'll look for it. Maybe somebody outside of my department can supply that.
I know we have done an analysis of, over the years, a few times of looking to outsource them also. And obviously, there's contractual scenarios that have to be considered. But I know the last time we did it, which must be about 4 years ago, the savings wasn't there that we had anticipated when we looked at it.
There are some factors, just so people understand. Our entire staff is around 35, 36 people, and that's about the minimum that we can operate with and still respond for emergencies and even things as simple as snow removal. There's always other ways of doing things, but I think we'd be hard-pressed if we eliminated those middle school positions to still operate the way we do now. Typically, we are always ready to open, even during a snowstorm. We're never closed because we're not ready. We're closed generally because Public Works cannot maintain the streets.
Not that they're not trying. It's the storm. Again, gotta be careful because I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I certainly next snow day don't want to come by and be here in my car be plowed in by Public Works. All right, so I'm just telling everybody,
Don't get mad, just get even.
Mr. Palmero, it's not because of you. It's called Mother Nature.
Did you see what happened yesterday with that bus?
Yes.
Delayed over.
Further questions? Mrs. Corso?
Yes, I'm sorry, can I go back a little bit?
Which
Sure.
page?
To page 2, where it talked about overtime for custodians and secretaries.
Sure.
What percentage of that overtime is being paid to our, is it a significant amount of overtime that's being paid to our middle school evening custodians?
We can get that data for you. We'd have to extrapolate that out.
Okay. Back on page 7. Further questions on this page?
Do you have a rent increase there?
Yes, it was negotiated.
What is our rental in this building annually?
The total rental, Mr. Barone, do you have that?
Total rental in the budget?
For this building.
We're gonna look that up.
We can move on. He'll come back with it.
No problem.
He's got it in the Bible over there. Don't worry. It's all good.
I'll get to it.
Yeah, no problem.
While we're waiting on that answer, further questions on this page?
It's 146,000.
146,000.
Could you restate that number again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 146,000 for this building.
Thank you.
Other questions on page 7? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 8. We're now into, again, purchase services.
Menzo, when is our contract up with the bus company?
We go out to bid, I believe, next year, correct, Mr. Barone? For the
Correct.
bus company?
Yes, yes, we have one more year after this year.
Okay, we'll move on to page 9. One of our favorites, tuitions. Mrs. Raccio?
I probably should find this in the questions and answers, but did we do the analysis for TEMS and WIMS to see if we have a 3-year average that could be reduced?
Yes, and at this present time, the one that we could go back and look at would be Wintergreen. Thames, we don't. We actually just got another student who transferred from another town into Thames today. That now is a Wallingford student. Wintergreen, we talked about this at central office. We wanted to give it another month because we are getting some students who are coming back just as recently as yesterday from Wintergreen also. So I just want to be a little bit more secure before we put out a number. But that's a potential area that we agreed that we could look at.
So you don't have a waiting list for
No, I see the things, it's tough to say you don't have a waiting list because there are certain grades that there are waiting lists, but there's not an overall waiting list. So we had reduced it this year to 55 from 61. And so now we have to look at what our present enrollment is, take this year's, the last 2 years, see what the new 3-year average is, to see where we are.
That's my question.
But again, it's a balancing act there.
They did. You had a question?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Wintergreen, the tuition's going up, right? But we're showing a reduction, the 3,021? We're estimating still 55 students, right? Shouldn't that be an increase, not a decrease? Sorry.
We're going to review that, but I believe we may have had, in the initial budget, we had, in the initial current year budget, there were more students.
Okay.
Okay, but what we're showing is
Yeah, just
actuals,
make sure,
but we're
because
gonna
to read that,
confirm
it's,
yeah.
that it doesn't
Confusing.
work, but
Doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
just to make sure.
And we'll come back with the student enrollment too. As I said, a parent called yesterday asking when would be the best time to transfer back. So I'm just waiting to hear back from that parent.
Other
Middle
questions
school
on this
parent.
page? Mrs. Corso?
What was the reason for the reduction in the amount of open choice students that we're accepting?
That goes back, and I know there are many veteran board members. It goes back to, I believe, the first year here when we were going through the difficult budget reduction because we were short $2.5 million in our regular operating budget the first year. And it was decided, and again, board members who were here, that while there was an added incentive to take students, the $2,500 per student, and then there was potential bonus money if you took a number of students, we were seeing upward trends in the special ed needs of those individuals, and we weren't seeing much to my lack of trying in talking to the former superintendent in New Haven, twice removed now, to get our money back. We never got it. We weren't going to get our money for that. So what was happening is some of the students came with significant needs, which again, we enjoyed having them as part of our population, but it became very difficult because the $2,500 was not covering the services that we were ending up to have to provide for those students. So it became a financial challenge for us. Because we don't have say as to who comes. They apply to come to our district.
Other questions on page 9? Okay, moving on to page 10. Workshops and conferences.
This is an area you'll see that we do have an increase, and especially in math, and I don't know if Ms. Latour, you want to speak to a little bit of that, just to...
It is a big one. We did our budget a little bit differently this year. We really tried to pinpoint by content specific conferences and workshops that our staff would need in order to be up to date with best practice, et cetera. Mrs. Medancy put in a substantial amount of money specifically for secondary math. That amount would reflect year-long professional development. So it's not a one-and-done type of conference. A consultant would be coming in, working with our high school teachers. They would come do professional development. They would go into the classroom, working with teachers throughout the school year in order to refine instructional practice with our high school staff. So, you know, understanding that it's new and it is different, but it is a multiple day, multiple month opportunity to professionally grow our high school mathematics department.
Mrs. Costelli?
So how does that fit in with the teacher's contract with PD? Is there an issue there, or that's fine?
No,
Okay.
yeah, it wouldn't be any different than being taken out of the classroom, say, for a professional development opportunity, but then also having a consultant come in your classroom, co-teach, model, et cetera.
Oh, so it's not additional hours?
No,
No,
Okay.
no,
no, not at all.
So you're telling me that the social studies department only has $1,000 allocated for professional development of any kind? Or how does that?
No, there's professional development sprinkled throughout the budget.
That's what I
Yep.
wanted to clarify.
So, first of all of the buildings have a professional development allocation, so that's first. Second, there's a general professional development line, so as teachers identify outside conferences that they would like to attend to professionally grow themselves, they can go through the building line item or through the curriculum office. This was identified as specific money for content, whether it's because certain curriculum is being written or there's certain need within the department. So math has an idea and a plan for next year. Other content areas put in an amount so that as things come up throughout the course of the year, that there is money for specific members of that department to go. So it's just to ensure that, you know, anytime that something comes up conference-wise that's aligned to what we're trying to do in a particular content area, that there's money there, whether it's at the building, the district level, or the department level, to be able to send our teachers, or during an early release day or a district-wide professional development day, to have somebody come here.
Because there are big changes coming in social studies, aren't
There are.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions on this page? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 11, supplies.
Again, we've received some questions. I know we've been looking at some surveys from parents and from staff, and I think, again, sometimes you look at the surface level and you don't get into the granular detail. The allocations have stayed the same. It's just based that there's reductions because the enrollment is lower. So that's why it's not that we're reducing what we're giving to teachers presently. It's just they're going to get less because they might have less students. The school might have less students. So we just want to make that clear. Because I know when you look at the summary, it looks like, wait a minute, they're reducing this much in instructional supplies. What are they doing? It's not because we're really reducing, it's just that we have less students to provide for.
So I've got a question about textbooks. I feel like, well, yes,
No,
you
it's
smile.
every year.
I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a lot of money allocated to textbooks. Can we talk, I don't, could we just, we're good with that?
Well, the money that's allocated for textbooks is $157,000.
Right.
So, that is for a set of math text and physical science text.
At what level?
High school for both. And the committees are working this spring to look at different publishers and to make decisions moving forward. So having two members of the curriculum office that are well-versed in textbook selection. They felt that this was an accurate reflection for what they would need to purchase those two texts. So it would be Algebra 1 and Earth Science.
And remember, only just 2 years ago, we added $70,000 to this line item. Prior
Right.
to that, this line item was only about $70,000 a year.
Right, right, and I appreciate that, but it just, like, it's surprising to think that even from a replenishment mode, we don't have any need to replenish, except Earth Science and Algebra 1. I guess that's new books that
Those
we're
are new
correct.
texts.
Yeah, right, I get that.
So that would be a large purchase.
Right,
And then
right.
within that as well, there is some money for every year when enrollment shifts.
Right.
The building is responsible for the purchase of textbooks, as is the curriculum department. So, you're anticipating your need.
Yeah.
For whatever overflow that you might need to replace. So,
And we have the catalog that was done about 4 years ago of the age of textbooks. Remember, we also used for the last,
Yeah.
not this year, but years prior, probably 2 years ago and the year before that, we used significant unencumbered funds to pre-purchase textbooks ahead of time.
I feel like we did, that's true.
There was a
but
huge
that's what makes
allocation.
me wonder, yeah, should
Well, I
we?
think we've, because Carrie has the timeline, I think we've kind of kept up with the
Well, that's good.
textbooks.
I'm
So
glad
that-
to
I
hear
think we're
that.
getting better with our ages. We don't have the 25-year-old social
Right,
studies
I
book.
feel like that wasn't
Um,
that long ago. I heard that, that's buzzing in my head.
But again, with your support as a board, we were very aggressive
Com-
using our unencumbered
Unencumbered funds.
We
okay.
used, I remember, and we could go back and look at the
No,
data.
I'm not
But I know
looking for
we
that.
used,
As long as you guys are comfortable,
Yeah.
I just look at that and
the
it
high
just
school
seems
was,
slow.
the high school was in a bad place about 4 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
it'll be
as lo-
next year and
Yeah, as
not
long
next
as-
year's budget, the following year, there'll be another lump sum for
Yeah.
the last bit of math textbooks that
Okay.
need to be done. So we're not trying to do it all in one year because
Sure.
it would be a hefty sum.
Yeah.
But there is a plan of action in place, and so you'll see that sum.
Okay, as long
Again.
as you're comfortable.
Mrs. Braccio?
I'm sure Carrie's going to look into this, but one of the questions that came up from PTAC last night was the K-2 schools and the books that were available, especially at the kindergarten level, now that we've gone to full-day kindergarten. And I think the parent used the word minuscule. So if we could just take a look to make sure now we have so many more students in that level, do we have adequate books for that
Yep,
group?
I emailed out all the elementary principals today to get a sense of their instructional leveled text, how much variety they have within the buildings, how many texts they have, below their grade span and above their grade span, and how they're allocating it out. So whether it's classroom inventory or a book room inventory, how much money is budgeted within their building allocation, et cetera. So I should have that for you shortly, maybe by Monday's meeting.
Could you check to see if they all are doing what you did at Rock Hill with the scanners? So that
I
we
can
don't have
ask
book
that,
loss?
yes.
That would be awesome, too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mrs. Purcell?
Okay, I just have a question about how you do allocations, and the reason is this. If you have a school that has 300 students, and then you have a school that has 350 students or 400 students, that school gets more, I assume, by student allocation, but your class size may be the same or even higher. A 300-student class may have, a teacher may have 19 or 20 kids, and the other class may have 17, so that teacher may need to be able to get materials for more kids per class. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking from like maybe a specialist point of view, but I'm just saying that it's hard when you have to still buy the same amount of equipment, but you get less money.
That's a building, to be honest, that's a building-based matter. So allocations, we don't determine where the allocations go from central office.
Okay.
We look at the general population, 300 students,
Yeah.
$50 a kid.
Okay, yeah.
That's how much the principal gets. And then the principals work on their budget to determine where that money goes. And working with his or her staff to identify the areas. So we don't get in at our level. That's really micromanaging. That's definitely in the weeds. That's really where the different principals, different schools looking at their school improvement plan. There might be certain areas that they want to focus on as a principal with his or her staff. So they might have a different focus. So that's why certain dollars go in certain areas. at a greater rate. But
Right.
yes, that's really what we try to do
Well,
with the
to
principals.
follow up to that then, art specialists, because at one time they were done through central office, so are they a
They
building-based now?
still are, some of them actually. So art, music is done through central office. Food and consumer science at the middle school is done through central office. And they get an allocation again based by a certain dollar amount times the number of students. From there, they also are supplemented in some cases by their building level principals through their allocation, depending on what it is. And that occurred, I want to say, about 6 or 7 years ago. That allocation went to central office. So PE is also done by central office as well. What has stayed in the elementary building, library stays in the building, computer, infotech teachers allocation comes from the building level allocation. World language is through the curriculum office for just elementary school. So there are differences in terms of how they're funded, in terms of who funds them, rather.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, are we investigating electronic textbooks at all?
You go for it.
Yeah, yes, we are, and in many cases, we have the online subscription, and the actual physical text is a part of the bundle. So they still have you buy the physical text, but you get the online subscription for that as part of the package. And so that has proved very useful, and the last few textbooks that the board has approved, especially while I've been here, have had an online component to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Votto?
Did you say that you had, you called it an outline, a list of all the books and their
Yeah, we had a
expiration dates
document.
or whatever, copyrights or whatever?
I can get that for you.
So do you feel that between these new algebra books, and you said
Send that
maybe
to
next year?
I know next year there'll be another
So you
set
think
of math texts
that'll
in
get our
there.
math text in the high school?
Don't
up?
send that to me, okay? I'm just telling you right now, I don't need to know copyright, sorry, Mike, I don't need
No, I
to
want to know
know
how old
copyright
some of the
dates.
texts are.
Yeah, no, we have that document because that was something that we've been working off of. That's how Carrie creates her budget. I have to say, one of the challenges, and you're bringing up the conversation that we have at central office. There's so many things we would love to do each year.
Yeah.
But then we balance it with maintaining staff.
Yeah.
And maintaining the commitment we've made to programming in our district. So that's really,
Now, well, with all due respect to certain people out there, you do hear people complain about the age of books.
Of
and
course.
sometimes I'd like to know how to answer.
I
you know?
appreciate that. No, we'll,
Because, you know what I'm trying to say. It's just
Oh, absolutely.
sometimes could be
Abs-
misinformation, and I like to know where I'm coming from. you know?
no, we'll definitely provide that. And we appreciate you correcting them
Yeah.
if you have an opportunity.
Other questions on page 11? Okay, on to page 12.
Here's oil.
Here's where oil is, yes.
Yeah, Mike?
Yep. Mr. Votto is happy we hit the oil
Missed it in
page.
the other page. Oh, good old oil, huh? $1 million.
It's not a bad
It
price,
is
though.
what it is, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nothing to talk about, really.
What is the typical temperature that we keep the schools at?
High school, 30.
They're kept as close to 70 as possible.
Depends on the
For the heating set point. Cooling's an entirely different thing.
Other questions on this page? Mrs. Castelli?
So just curious, where's some of our furnaces are gas, or, right? So
Dual fuel.
Or both.
Or
they're
both,
both,
that's
right? But I
right.
mean, this only says oil.
Back
So is-
page.
Oh, was it on the back? I'm sorry. I
Isn't
missed it.
it, guys?
Where?
Didn't I see gas?
It should be in the 400.
Yeah, I think it's in a different account.
It was somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to know why oil wasn't there.
Well, why don't you
It's
ask my
on,
question?
it's on page 6.
Okay, page
But
6.
These accounts are coded based on what the state recommends, and that's why
Oh, gas.
the oils
But
in the
that's
6
non-heat.
No, that's
series
not
and
heat.
the electric water and gas
Yeah, but that's non-heat.
on page 6.
Yeah, but
That's non-heat.
That's non-heat.
That's cooking gas.
Gas, non-heat, yeah. Yeah, so where's our gas? We don't want those schools to be, you know, freezing.
That should be in here under utilities, should it
Wait a second.
This is okay, this is why you need lists.
be? Lists? For what? What do you mean?
I'll see if we can't find that answer.
It's in the 690 series. The,
690, that's where we are. And all that's listed here
Are
is
we
oil.
missing some?
Maybe it just didn't show up on our sheets, maybe?
Those
690,
just
yeah,
won't
you would
be heat.
think heat.
Yeah, we just have
Yeah.
heat, oil
Right.
estimated
We're just not gonna
usage.
heat 'em.
We're gonna heat 'em.
Unless that's a, is that a combined?
cost.
Tony. It's gotta be someplace else.
It's where? All right, well, we don't have to spend time looking for it now, I mean, just find it, that's all. you know.
Just find it.
Just make sure it's there.
It's in there.
All right, just find it and let us know
Could
next
you,
time.
or, you have the, do you have the cost?
We have the interruptible gas.
Right.
And it's called that in the
Yeah.
system, but it's not interruptible anymore. We're not allowed to do that. Correct, Mark?
That is correct.
Okay.
So what is the
Decide
new
at the
name?
beginning of the
We-
year,
we-
whether we're doing one or the other, is that how that works now? Mark, we have to decide at the beginning of the year which we're using? Is that-
We do, that's
Yeah.
how it's normally handled, whatever's going to be most cost-effective. But the interruptible refers to something the gas company used to offer,
Right.
and they no longer do. That was an incentive to switch over when it got cold out
Right.
to oil.
That's right.
It's no longer offered.
So the gas on page 30, as was alluded to, it's the interruptible, which we're not to call it, is $299,276, $299,276. And then the
299 what?
$299,276. And then the other aspect of the gas, the firm, is $105,065. So basically about a little over $400,000 for natural gas expenditures. And then you have oil, which is at $647,593, which gives you the request of
Oh, so it adds up.
$1,051,934.
It got consolidated up, is
Thank
is what happened. But
That's what I'm here for, you know, every so often.
Good one.
I serve a purpose every so often.
Well, that solves a mystery.
Good catch, business.
Any other questions on page 12? Moving on to page 13, property. No questions? Move on to page 14, miscellaneous. Could you just explain a little bit about, again, for a refresher, dues and fees? What does that cover?
Sure. Dues and fees covers a wide range of professional organizations that we subscribe to as a district for staff, teachers, administrators. This is an area that we continue to reduce this year because we were looking at making certain that we have a district license or a district dues being paid rather than having every school having a membership. We looked at it more from a systemic approach of a district approach. And we did away with a lot of opportunities, one of which like Marshall Memo, which is something that our principals would subscribe to. My professional organization now, as part of our dues, gives it to us for free. I then send it out to all the administrators for free. And so we saved that cost. So we tried to look at that very closely. That was our telethon day in central office. We put out an email to all administrators and said they needed to come back within the next half hour to 45 minutes with as much money as they could give us to get us closer to where we wanted to be. And dues and fees was the area that everybody came in at. So we appreciated our administrators. They did a great job that day. Oh yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it was absolutely amazing how responsive the administrative team was and how supportive.
Other questions on this page?
Yeah, just one quick one. Why is there an increase for graduation?
That deals with the tent that we actually provide. It's not for our graduation, it's for project graduation. So we paid, and I finally put it in the budget because every year we had to take it from contingency.
Okay.
And I said, you know what, we know it's going to go up. We make that donation for project graduation. Just let's show it where it needs to be this year.
Okay. Any other questions on, that you have come up with, inclusive of page 1 to 14? Maybe you thought about it and wanted to go back and ask something else? No? Mrs. Corso?
I think I'm still a little stuck on the amount of money spent on overtime in our district, and I'm wondering if you can flesh that out a little more for us.
What page are you on?
Was that 2?
It's
Page
page 2,
Yes,
$412,000 a year budgeted for overtime.
correct. And
Custodians and
we'll
secretaries.
provide all of that information for you by unit. We usually Mrs. Levelette has that with her. So we'll make sure that when she returns, I believe she'll be back on Monday. But I'll get that work done tomorrow through personnel for her.
Thank you.
Other remarks?
And again, just so you know, that's not just clerical, that goes through maintenance, so it's snow removal, it's all of those other items. Sometimes it's expenditures for keeping buildings open for programs that are school-run, not outside affiliated. But we should be able to get a clear accounting of the different departments and what those are all about. Sometimes it also is because we had open positions in clerical, like business department had an open payroll position for a while because we had a retirement. So I know that was an accounting piece, but we'll take a look at that.
Okay, is this a good place to break, and then we could ask for public comment and question at this point on this particular section? Are there any questions or comment from the public? Please step to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Diana Coons. I'm sorry, I'm going to be kind of reading through my notes, but good evening.
Do you have your address, please?
I'm sorry. 135 Bates Drive in Cheshire. But I'm a town employee. Is that okay?
Typically, we have, yes, comments from residents,
Wallingford
but,
residents?
you know,
Okay.
yes. But go ahead.
I'm a Parker Farms teacher, and I do currently have a daughter at Marion. There's another residence in town.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I just wanted to thank all of you in person. As a teacher in town, I don't get to see all your faces, so just sitting here, I could see how much work goes into your jobs. My name is Diana Coons, as I said, and I'm a parent of a daughter at Marion Middle School, and I am in my 23rd year of teaching in this district, presently at Parker Farms in third grade. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of my colleagues, Raymond, Krissa, and Kim, who are in possible jeopardy of losing their positions. and a voice for the children in our classrooms. Over my teaching career, I've experienced many, many changes and demands. Most are inevitable if we are to provide best practices for teaching and learning. One thing that hasn't changed is the importance of keeping our class sizes low. On paper, especially when discussing the budget, a child in our classroom becomes an average class number, 20.5, 18, 22. Aside from being a number, these students are someone's child who has special education needs, is bilingual, ELL, receives intervention, receives social work services, is in STEP. They might come in crying because they're worried their field trip money wasn't turned in. They may want to tell you about winning the all-around for gymnastics that weekend, and on, all day long. Each and every student deserves our best attention, whether academic or social emotional. Smaller classes do matter because they matter to a child. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes? Come on up, Ann.
Good evening, Ann Verone Letterly, 344 Main Street. Also Wallingford parent and a Wallingford teacher, also vice president of the WEA. In conjunction with what Mrs. Coons is saying with smaller class size, one of the line items that jumped out at me considerably tonight when we were going through the object code was the $58,370 for math PD for next year. When you look at a beginning starting teacher salary along with his or her benefit package, it's not quite the same amount, but pretty much in the same domain. So PD for one department, extra for a speaker, and in-house PD is the, not quite, but almost the equivalent of 1 year teacher salary. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or remarks from the public? Anything else from the board? No. Seeing none, we're adjourned.